네, 안녕하십니까. 네, 오늘 영어 쉐도잉 30회차 연습 녹화 시작하겠습니다. 네, 벌써 이제 한 달이 다 되었는데요. 저는 매일 30분씩 영어 쉐도잉을 연습하는 영상을 녹화하고 있습니다. 나중에 한 100일 정도 이 연습을 지속한 다음에 제가 어떻게 영어 실력이 바뀌는지를 관찰하려고 합니다. 저는 테드 영상을 가지고 영어 쉐도잉 하고 있고, 제가 보는 영상은 Simple Way to Break a Bad Habit 이라는 영상이고, 습관에 관해서 과학적으로 접근하는 방법에 대해서 어, 어, 설명을 하고 있습니다. 강연자는 저드슨 브루어이고, 한번 네, 오늘도 연습을 해보겠습니다.
When I was first learning to meditate,
When I was first learning to meditate,
the instruction was to simply pay attention to my breath,
the instruction was to simply pay attention to my breath,
and when my mind wandered, to bring it back.
and when my mind wandered, to bring it back.
It sounded simple enough,
Sounded simple enough.
yet I'd sit on these silent retreats,
Yet I sit on the silent retreats,
sweating through t-shirts in the middle of winter.
sweating through t-shirts in the middle of winter.
I'd take naps every chance I got because it was really hard work.
I take naps every chance I got because it was really hard work.
Actually, it was exhausting.
Actually, it was exhausting.
The instruction was simple enough, but I was missing something really important.
The instruction was simple enough, but I was something missing. But I was missing something really important.
So why is it so hard to pay attention?
So why is it so hard to pay attention?
Well, studies show that even when we're really trying to pay attention to something,
Where studies show that even when we're really trying to pay attention to something,
like maybe this talk,
like maybe this talk,
at some point about half of us will drift off into a daydream
at some point about half of us will drift into a daydream,
or have this urge to check our Twitter feed.
or have this urge to check our Twitter feed.
So what's going on here?
So what's going on here?
It turns out that we're fighting one of the most evolutionarily conserved learning processes currently known in science.
It turns out that we're fighting one of the most evolutionarily conserved learning processes currently known in science.
One that's conserved back to the most basic nervous systems known to man.
One that's conserved back to the most basic nervous systems known to man.
This reward-based learning process is called positive and negative reinforcement and basically goes like this.
And the reward-based learning process is called positive and negative reinforcement, and basically goes like this.
We see some food that looks good, our brain says,
We see some food that looks good, our brain says,
calories,
calories,
survival.
survival.
We eat the food, we taste it tastes good.
We eat the food, we taste it tastes good,
And especially with sugar,
and especially with sugar,
our body sends a signal to our brain that says,
body sends a signal to our brain that says,
remember what you're eating and where you found it.
remember what you're eating, where you found it.
We lay down this context-dependent memory
We lay down this context-dependent memory
and learn to repeat the process next time.
and run to repeat the process next time.
See food,
See food,
eat food, feel good, repeat.
repeat.
Trigger, behavior, reward. Simple, right? Well, after a while, our creative brains
Well, after a while, our creative brain says,
say, you know what?
you know what?
You can use this for more than just remembering where food
You
is.
can use this for more than just remembering where food is.
You know, next time you feel bad,
You know, next time you feel bad,
why don't you try eating something
why
good
don't you try eating something good
so you'll feel better?
so you'll feel better?
We thank our brains for the great idea.
We think our brains for a great idea.
Try this and quickly learn that if we eat chocolate
Try it and quickly learn that if we eat chocolate or ice cream
when we're mad or
when you're
sad, we
mad
feel
or
better.
sad, we feel better.
Same process,
Same
just a
process,
different trigger.
just a different trigger.
Instead of this hunger signal coming from our stomach,
Instead of this hunger signal coming from our stomach,
this emotional
this
signal,
emotional
feeling
signal
sad
feeling
triggers that
sad
urge to eat.
triggers that urge to eat.
Maybe in our teenage years,
Maybe in our teenage years,
we were a nerd at school,
we were a nerd at school,
and we see those rebel kids outside smoking, we think, hey,
and we see those little kids outside smoking, and we think,
hey, I want to be
hey,
cool.
I want
So
to
we
be cool,
start
so we
smoking.
start smoking.
The Marlboro Man wasn't a dork,
The
and
Marlboro
that was
Man
no
wasn't a
accident.
dog, and there was no accident.
See cool,
See cool,
smoke to be
smoke to be
cool,
cool,
feel good.
feel good.
Repeat.
Repeat.
Trigger,
Trigger,
behavior, reward.
reward.
And each time we do
And
this,
each time
we
we
learn
do
to
this,
repeat the
we
process.
learn to repeat the process.
And it becomes a habit.
And it becomes a habit.
So later,
Feeling
stressed
stressed
out triggers
out,
that urge to
triggers
smoke
the
a
urge to
cigarette
smoke a
or
cigarette
to eat something
or
sweet.
eat something sweet.
Now with these
Now with these
same brain processes,
processes,
we've gone from
we've
learning
gone
to
from learning to
survive
survive
to literally
to
killing
really killing
ourselves
ourselves
with these habits.
with these habits.
Obesity and smoking
Obesity and
are
smoking
among
are
the
among
leading
the
preventable
leading
causes of
preventable causes
morbidity
of
and
morbidity and
mortality
mortality
in the
in
world.
the world.
So back to
So
my
back
breath.
to my breath.
What if
What if instead of
fighting our brains or
trying to force ourselves to pay attention,
we instead tapped into this natural
we instead tapped into this natural reward-based
reward-based learning process,
learning processes,
but added a
but
twist?
added a twist?
What if instead we
What
just
if
got really
instead we
curious
just got
about what
really
was
curious
happening
about
in our
what is
momentary
happening
experience? I'll give you an
in our momentary in a momentary experience?
example.
Here's an
In my lab, we studied what it's natural reward-based learning process, but added a twist. What if instead we just got really curious about what was happening in our momentary experience? I'll give you an example.
I'll give you an example.
In my lab, we studied whether mindfulness training could help people quit smoking.
In my lab, we studied whether mindfulness training could help people quit smoking.
Now, just like trying to force myself to pay attention
to pay attention
on my breath,
to my breath,
they could try to force themselves to quit smoking.
They could try to force themselves with smoking.
And the majority of them had tried this before and failed.
And majority of them had tried this before and failed.
On average 6 times.
6 times.
Now with mindfulness training, we dropped a bit about force.
Now mindfulness training, in mindfulness training, we dropped a bit about forcing
And instead focused on being curious. In fact, we even told them to smoke. What? We said, go ahead and smoke. Just be really curious about what it's like when you do. And what did they notice?
And what did they notice? And what did they notice?
Well, here's an example from one of our smokers. She said, mindful smoking smells like stinky cheese and tastes like chemicals. Yuck. Now, she knew cognitively that smoking was bad for her. That's why she joined our program. What she discovered just by being curiously aware when she smoked was that smoking tastes like shit. Now, she moved from knowledge to wisdom. She moved from knowing in her head that smoking was bad for her to knowing it in her bones. And the spell of smoking was broken. She started to become disenchanted with her behavior. Now, the prefrontal cortex, that youngest part of our brain from an evolutionary perspective, it understands on an intellectual level that we shouldn't smoke. And it tries its hardest to help us change our behavior, stop smoking, to help us stop eating that second, that third, that fourth, to help us stop eating the second, the third, the fourth cookie. We call this cognitive control. We're using cognition.
We call this cognitive control.
To control our behavior.
We're using cognition to control our behaviors.
Unfortunately, this is also the first part of our brain that goes offline when we get stressed.
Unfortunately, this is also the first part of our brain that goes offline when we're stressed out or tired.
Stressed out, which isn't that healthy. Well, we're using cognition to control our behavior. Unfortunately, this is also the first part of our brain that goes offline when we get stressed out.
Unfortunately, this is also the first part of our brain that goes offline when it gets stressed out.
Which isn't that helpful.
Which isn't that helpful.
And we can all relate to this in our own experience.
And we can all relate to this in our own experience.
We're much more likely to do things like
yell
at our spouse or kids when we're stressed out or tired.
Our spouse or kids when you're stressed out or tired.
Even though we know it's not going to be helpful.
Even though we know it's not going to be helpful.
Ourselves.
We just can't help ourselves.
Now, when the
Now,
prefrontal cortex goes offline,
now, when the prefrontal cortex goes offline,
we fall back into our
we
old
fall back
habits,
into our
which
older
is why this
habits,
disenchantment is
which
so
is why
important. Seeing what
this disenchantment is so important.
we get from our habits helps
Seeing
us
what we get from our habits
understand them in a deeper level,
helps us understand them at a deeper level.
to know it in
To
our
know in
bones.
our
So we don't have to
bones.
force ourselves to hold back
We don't have to force ourselves to
or
hold back
restrain
or
ourselves from behavior.
restrain ourselves from behavior.
We're just less interested in doing it in
We're
the first
just less interested in doing it in the first place.
And this is what
And
mindfulness
this
is
is
all
what
about.
mindfulness is all about.
Seeing really clearly
Seeing
what
really
we get
clearly
when
what
we
you
get caught
get
up
when
in
you
our
get caught up in our
behaviors,
behaviors,
becoming
becoming
disenchanted
disenchanted
on a visceral level.
on a visceral level,
And from this disenchanted
and from this
stance, naturally
disenchanted
letting go.
stance, naturally letting go.
This isn't to say
This
that
isn't to say that
poof, magically we quit
magically we
smoking,
quit smoking,
but over time, as
but
we
over
learn
time,
to
as
see
we
more
learn
and
to
more
see more
clearly
and
the
more clearly
results of
the
our
results of
actions,
our actions,
we let go of
we
old
let go of our
habits and
habits
form new
and
ones.
form new ones.
The paradox
The
here
paradox
is
here
that mindfulness is just about being really
is the mindfulness is just about
interested
being
in getting
really
close and
interested
personal with what's
in getting close and personal
actually
with what's
happening in our
actually happening
bodies and minds from moment to moment.
in our bodies and minds from moment to moment.
This willingness to turn toward our experience rather
This willingness to turn toward our experiences
than trying to make
rather
unpleasant
than
cravings
rather
go
than
away.
trying to make unpleasant cravings go away as quickly as possible.
And this
And
willingness
this
to turn
willingness to turn toward our
is
experiences
supported by curiosity,
is supported by
which is
curiosity,
naturally rewarding.
which is
What does
naturally
curiosity
rewarding.
feel like?
What does curiosity feel like?
It feels good.
It feels good.
And what happens when we get curious?
And what happens
We
when we
start
get
to
curious?
notice the
We start
cravings
to
are
notice
simply made up of body
we
sensations.
start to notice the cravings. We start to notice the cravings are simply. We start to notice the cravings are simply made up of body sensations.
Oh, there's tightness,
Or there's
tension,
tightness, there's
there's
tension, there's
restlessness,
restlessness,
and that these body sensations come
and
and
these
go.
body sensations come and go.
These are bite-sized
These
pieces of experience
These are bite-sized pieces of experiences
that we can manage from moment to moment,
that we can manage from moment to moment,
rather than getting clobbered
rather
by
than getting cluttered by
this
this
huge,
huge,
scary
scary
craving that
craving
we choke on.
that we choke on.
In other words,
In other words,
when we get curious,
when we get curious,
we step out of our
we step
old
out of our old
fear-based reactive habit
fear-based
patterns,
reactive
and we step
habit patterns.
into being.
We step into
We
being.
become this
We become
inner
this inner
scientist,
scientist
where we're
where
eagerly
we're eagerly
awaiting
awaiting
that
the
next data
next
point.
data point.
Now,
Now,
this might
this might sound too simplistic to affect behavior,
but in one study
but
we
in one
found that
study we found that
mindfulness
mindfulness
training
training
was
was
twice as good as gold standard therapy at helping people quit
therapy
smoking.
at helping people quit
So it
smoking.
actually works.
So it actually works.
And when we studied the
And
brains
we
of
studied the
experienced
brains of
meditators, we found that parts of a neural
we
network
found that parts of a neural network
of the
of
self-referential
of
processing
the
called the default mode network
of the self-referential processing called the default mode network were at play.
Now one
Now,
current hypothesis
one current hypothesis is
that a
that
region of this
a
network
region
called
of this network,
the posterior cingulate cortex, really by craving itself, is that a region of this network called the
region of this network called the posterior cingulate cortex
is
is
activated not necessarily by craving
not necessarily by craving itself,
itself, but when we get
but
caught up
but
in
when
it,
it
we
gets
get
caught up
sucked
in
in
it,
and it takes us
when it
for
gets
a
sucked
ride.
in and it takes us
In
for a ride.
contrast, when we let go,
In contrast,
step
when
out-
I let go,
out of the process,
step
just
out
by
of the
being
process,
curiously aware of what's happening, this same brain region in and it takes us for a ride. In contrast, when we let go, step out of the process,
step out of the process,
by being curiously aware of what's happening,
just by being curiously aware of what's happening,
this same brain region quiets
the
down.
same brain region quiets down.
Now we're
Now we're
testing
testing
app and online-based training programs
mindfulness training
that
programs
target
that target these core mechanisms.
And ironically,
And
use the same technology
ironically, just use same technology
that's driving us to
that's driving us
to
to distraction, help us step
our
out of our
unhealthy habit patterns of
unhealthy
smoking,
habit patterns
of
of
stress eating,
smoking,
and
of
other
stress
addictive
eating,
behaviors.
other addictive behaviors.
Now remember that bit about context-dependent memory?
Remember
We
that bit about context-dependent
can
memory?
deliver these tools
We can deliver these tools
to people's
to people's
fingertips
fingertips in the context that matter most.
so we can help
So
them
we can
tap
have them
into their
tap
inherent
into their
capacity
inherent
to be
capacity
curiously
to
aware
be curiously
right when that
aware
urge to smoke
right
or
when the
stress
urge to
eat or
smoke or
whatever
stress eat,
arises.
whatever arises.
So So if you don't
So if you
smoke or
don't smoke or
stressing,
stressing,
maybe the next
maybe
time
next
you feel
time
this urge to check your email when
you
you're
feel the urge to check your you feel this urge to check your email
bored, or
when
you're
you're
trying to
bored
distract
or
yourself from
trying to
work,
distract yourself
or
from
maybe to
work,
compulsively
maybe to
respond to
comprehensively
that text message when you're
respond to
driving.
text message when you're
See if you
driving.
can tap
See if
into
you can tap
this
into
natural
this natural
capacity. Just be
capacity.
curiously aware of
Just be
what's
curious
happening
about
in your
what's
body and mind in
happening
that moment. It
in
will
our
just be another
in our body and minds at the moment.
chance to perpetuate one
It
of our
will it will just be another chance to perpetuate
endless and
one of our
exhaustive habit
endless
loops,
and
or
exhaustive
step out
habit
of
loops,
it.
or step out of it.
Instead of see text
Instead of
message,
see text
compulsively text back,
message,
feel a
conversing
little
text
bit
back,
better.
feel a little
Notice
bit
the
better.
urge.
Notice the urge.
Get curious.
Get curious.
Feel the joy of letting
Feel
go.
the joy of letting
and
go.
repeat.
And repeat.
Thank you.
Thank you. 네, 한 번 연습이 끝났습니다. 네, 지금 15분 정도 했고요. 제가 또 다음 영상으로 준비한 것은 유튜브 영상인데요. 유튜브에서 저는 닐 디그레이스 타이슨이라는 천문학자가 정말로 어려운 일을 해내는 사람들의 마인드셋에 대해서 얘기를 한 게 있습니다. 그거를 스노우볼이라는 유튜버가 정리를 해놨어요. 그래서 그걸 보고
I was a physics major at SUNY Albany.
Hi, I was a physics major in SUNY Albany.
And it was really, really hard.
네, 지금 이것은 이제 아직 이 영상은 자막을 보고 가고 있고요. 자막이 빨리 지나가서 잘 안 보이네요. It was really, really hard.
I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't for you, but I was hoping.
I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't for you. I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't for you.
Maybe you could share as your time as a student and then professor and then lecturer.
But I was hoping maybe you can share if you can share if you.
Professor and. But I was hoping maybe you could share.
But I was hoping maybe you can share as your time as a student and then professor and then lecturer.
As your time as a student and then
As your time
professor and then lecturer and an aha
and
or like eureka moment,
like
where something finally clicked for you.
like where something finally clicked for you.
A couple of things.
Well, a couple of things. First,
there's very little in life
there is very little in life
that's worth achieving.
that's worth
That isn't
achieving
hard.
that isn't hard.
Those things that are hard because most people can't do it.
Those things that are hard because most people can't do it.
That's why we say they're hard.
That's why we say they're hard.
If you work at it and achieve it,
If you work at it and achieve it,
this,
this
and you continue that throughout your life,
and you continue this throughout your life,
you
you
are
are
distinguishing yourself
distinguishing
among
yourself
others around you
among others around you
what you have achieved.
by what you have achieved.
And those who
rise
the highest
rise
are
the
those
highest
who keep
are those who
solving hard
keep
things.
solving harder things.
And you'd be surprised
And you'd be
how
surprised at how
intellectually lazy we can
we can
You go to
become.
college and
You
you say,
go
"I'm
to
gonna take
college
this
and you
easy."
say, I'm going to take this easy class. You go to college and you say, I'm going to take this easy class
class so that I can get an
so
A.
that I can get an A.
Then everyone will be impressed with my A.
Then everyone will be impressed with my A. Then everyone will be impressed with my A.
Well, A is supposed to be a proxy for how brilliant you are.
Well, A is supposed to be your proxy for how brilliant you are.
Well, your brilliance is not measured then by your grade.
Well, your brilliance is not measured then by your grade. Your brilliance is not measured then by your grade. Your brilliance is not measured then by your grade.
It's measured by what you actually accomplish.
It's measured by what you actually accomplish out there. It's measured by what you actually accomplish out there.
So that's why in the most brilliant people out there, you don't.
So that's in the most people, brilliant people.
That's why in the most brilliant people out there.
So that's why in the most brilliant people out there. So that's why in the most brilliant people out there.
You don't ask them what grades they got. The grades.
We don't ask them the grades they got.
Brilliant people out there, you don't ask them what grades they got.
You don't ask them what grades they got. You don't ask them what grades they got. What grades they got.
Ask them what grades they got. The grades
You don't ask them what grades they got.
are irrelevant.
Their grades are irrelevant. Their grades are irrelevant.
It's the hard things that they encountered and tackled.
It's the hard things that they encountered and tackled.
Leads me to the famous quote from John Kennedy.
Leads me to the famous quote from John Kennedy. Leads me to the famous quote from John Kennedy.
The famous quote from John Kennedy. We choose
to go to the moon.
Not because it's
Not
easy,
because it's easy,
because it's hard.
but because it's
Did you
hard.
ever get discouraged along the way?
Did you ever get discouraged along the way?
Did you ever fail a test and say,
Yeah,
Did you ever fail a test?
I remember.
Yeah, I mean, I remember.
Discouraged. I don't know if discouraged is the right word.
I don't know if the word discourage is right word.
I don't know if discouraged is the right word.
I don't know if the word discourage is right word.
I remember opening a calculus book for the first time.
I remember opening a calculus book for the first time.
In high school.
In high school.
And calculus is not some natural next step after algebra, right?
And calculus is not some natural next step after algebra, right? And calculus is not some natural next step after algebra, right? And calculus is not some natural next step after algebra, right?
It's a completely
different new way of thinking about the relationships of things that change in the world.
And you open up the book
And you can you open up the book and all these key lines and all these alphabets
Greek letters.
drawn from Greek letters. And it's like, I will never understand this ever. I will never understand this ever.
Should I bail now?
Should I bail
while I
now?
have the chance?
While
And
I
I said,
have
let
the
me
chance? While I have the chance?
and I said, let me
And I
just
said,
try this.
let me just try
And a
this.
month later,
And a month later, after I said, hey, kind of
know what
understandable.
that is. Oh,
Think I know what that is. Think I know what that is.
2 months later, hey.
2 months later, hey.
3 months later,
3 months
got
later,
this.
I got this.
and that was that.
And that was
that moment
that moment
for the rest of my
for the
life.
rest of my
was,
life.
It was,
Rest
became
of my life. Rest of
proxy
my life.
for me saying,
It became proxy for me saying,
if at first encounter,
if
I
at
have no
first
clue what's
encounter
going on.
I have no clue what's going on. If at first encounter I have no clue what's going on.
Just spend time learning it.
Just spend time learning it.
It sounds simple.
I mean, it sounds simple.
But you could. I would realize how profound that fact.
But I would realize how profound that fact.
That fact. How profoundly that would affect the rest of my life.
How profoundly that affect the rest of my life. How profoundly that will affect the rest of my life.
Anytime I saw something I didn't understand, work at it.
Anytime I saw something I didn't understand, work at it.
do you use calculus?
Do you
All
use
the
a
time.
calculus?
There is no
All the
understanding
time.
of the physical universe.
All the time.
All the time. There is no understanding of the physical universe without calculus.
There is no understanding of the physical universe without calculus. 네, 그래도 시간이 남았네요. 그걸 한 번 더 듣도록 하겠습니다. 다시 처음부터.
Hi,
Hi.
I was a physics major at SUNY Albany,
Hi, I was a physics major at SUNY Albany,
and it was really, really hard.
and it was really, really hard.
I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't for you, but
I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't for you.
I was hoping maybe you could share as your time as a student,
But I was hoping maybe you can share as your time as a
student, and then
student
professor, and
and
then
a professor and
an
lecturer
aha,
and
or like
aha,
eureka moment,
like eureka
like
moment,
where something
like
finally
where
clicked for
something
you.
finally clicked for you.
Well, a
Well,
couple things.
a couple of
First,
things. First,
there's very little in
there's
life
very little in life
that's worth
that's
achieving
worth achieving
that isn't hard.
that isn't hard.
Those things that are
Those
hard
things
are
that
hard
are
because
hard
most
are
people
hard
can't
because
do it.
most people can't
That's
do
why
it.
we say they're
That's
hard.
why we say they're
If you
hard.
work at it
If
and
you work
achieve
at it
it,
and achieve it,
this
this,
and you continue that throughout your
and you
life,
can and you continue that
are-
throughout your life, you are
distinguishing
distinguishing
yourself
yourself
among others
among
around
others
you
around
by
you
what you have
by what
achieved.
you have achieved.
And
And those who
rise
rise
the
the
highest
highest
are those who
keep
keep
solving hard things.
And you'd be
And
surprised
you'd be
how
surprised
lazy,
how
intellectually lazy we can become.
we can
You go to
become.
college
You
and
go to
I'm gonna
college
take
and you
this easy
say,
class
I'm gonna take
so
this
that I
easy
can get an
class
A.
so that I can get an
Then
A.
everyone will be impressed
Then
with my
everyone will be
A.
impressed with my
Well,
A.
A is supposed to
Where A
be a
is
proxy
supposed to
for
be
how
your
brilliant
proxy
you
for
are.
how brilliant you
Well,
are.
your brilliance is
But
not
your
measured then
brilliance
by
is
your
not
grade.
measured then
It's
by your
measured by
grade.
what you
It's
actually
measured by what
accomplish
you
out there.
actually accomplish
So,
out there.
That's
So that's why in the most brilliant people out there, you don't ask them what grades they got. Their grades are irrelevant. It's the hard things that they encounter and tackle.
leads me
Leads me to the famous quote from John Kennedy: "We choose to go to the moon, not because it's easy, but because it's hard." Did you ever get discouraged along the way? Did you ever fail a test?
Yeah,
I mean, I remember
discouraged.
I don't know if the word discouraging is right. I remember opening calculus for the first time in high school.
And calculus
And calculus is not some natural next step after algebra, right?
It's a
It's completely different way of thinking about the relationship of things that change in the world. And you open up the book and all these calculus lines and all these alphabets drawn from Greek letters. And it's like, I will never understand this ever. Should I pay now? Will I have the chance? And I said, let me just try it. And a month later after, hey, kind of understand that. Think I know what that is. 2 months later, hey, 3 months later, I got this. And that was that moment
for the rest
of my life.
It became proxy.
It became proxy for me saying, if at first encounter, I have no clue what's going on.
Just
spend time learning.
It sounds simple.
I mean, it sounds simple.
I would realize how
profound that fact, how profoundly that will affect the rest of my life. Anytime I saw something I didn't understand, work at it. Do you use calculus all the time? There's no understanding of the physical universe without calculus. 네, 이번엔 자막 켜놓고 한번 쭉 따라해봤습니다.
이건
네, 그러면은 오늘 여기까지 하겠습니다. 이제 또 새로운 또 영상을 좀 알아봐야 될 것 같네요. 시간이 좀 남아서. 네, 그럼 오늘 여기까지 하겠습니다. 네, 감사합니다.